The first time I heard him, I thought it was the house settling. That's what you tell yourself when you live alone in a 100-year-old farmhouse at the edge of nothing. You blame the wind. You blame the old timber. You blame the darkness pressing against every window like it's trying to get in. You don't blame the man you sent to prison. It was past midnight when the storm rolled over the valley. The kind of storm that makes the power flicker and the dogs on neighboring farms fall silent long before the thunder hits. I was in bed, staring at the ceiling, doing what I always did when the world got too quiet, counting the cracks in the plaster like rosary beads. That's when I heard it. Not a creak. Not the groan of an old house settling on its foundation. This was different. Deliberate. The slow, careful shift of weight above my head. Like someone trying to move without being heard and failing anyway. I told myself it was a raccoon. They got into attic sometimes. It made sense. It was reasonable. I held on to that explanation like a lifeline. Then I heard the coughing. Muffled. Desperate. The kind of cough a man makes when he's trying to stay silent and his body won't let him. I didn't move for a full minute. I just lay there, my heart slamming against my ribs, listening to the sound of another human being breathing in my attic. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to call the police, to get out. But my body wouldn't cooperate. It was frozen in that bed, trapped between terror and the horrible pull of curiosity. Because something about that cough was familiar. No, that wasn't possible. I told myself it wasn't possible. I'd spent 3 years rebuilding my life from the ashes of what he'd done to it. I'd moved 300 miles away from the city where we met. I'd changed my hair, my name, my entire existence. I'd testified in front of a courtroom full of strangers and look him in the eyes while I told them everything. I'd watched them take him away in handcuffs. He was supposed to be in a federal prison. He was supposed to be someone else's nightmare now. The coughing came again, harsher this time, followed by a soft thud, like a body collapsing against the floorboards. I reached for the fireplace poker I kept beside my bed. It was cold and heavy in my hands, a ridiculous weapon against whatever waited upstairs. But it was something. It was better than nothing. The attic hatch was in the hallway ceiling, a square of pressed wood with a pull cord dangling from it. I'd never opened it. Never wanted to. The previous owner had left boxes up there, old photograph albums and Christmas decorations, and I'd been happy to pretend the space didn't exist. Now I stood beneath it, listening to the rain hammer the roof, and I couldn't pretend anymore. I pulled the cord. The hatch swung down with a groan, and a wooden ladder unfolded itself like a skeleton unfolding its bones. Cold air spilled out from the darkness above. It smelled like dust and old wood and something else, something metallic and warm. Blood. I climbed. The flashlight on my phone was the only light. I held it in one hand, the poker in the other, and I climbed slowly, one rung at a time, my breath catching in my throat with every step. The attic was bigger than I expected. Low ceilings, exposed beams, insulation clinging to the walls like old cobwebs. Boxes were stacked in corners, covered in years of dust. A single small window at the far end let in flashes of lightning, illuminating the space in brief, violent bursts. I swept the flashlight beam across the floor. At first, I saw nothing. Just old furniture draped in sheets, the ghost shapes of chairs and tables. Then the light caught something that didn't belong. A boot. Black leather. Scuffed and worn. Sticking out from behind a stack of boxes. My hand trembled. The beam wavered. I forced myself to step forward, to move closer, to see what I already knew I would find. He was lying on his side, curled into himself like a wounded animal. His clothes were soaked through, rain or river water, I couldn't tell. His face was half hidden in shadow, but I could see the dark stains spreading across his shoulder, the way his hand pressed against it with weak, desperate pressure. Blood. So much blood. For a moment, I thought he was dead. Then his chest hitched, and a low groan escaped his lips, and his head turned toward the light. I saw his face. And the world stopped. It was him. Older. Thinner. His jaw covered in weeks of beard, his cheeks hollow, his eyes sunken and dark. But unmistakably him. The same high cheekbones I used to trace with my fingertips. The same shape of mouth that had whispered promises in the dark. The same eyes that had watched me from the witness stand with an expression I'd never been able to read. Caleb. He looked at me, and for one endless second, neither of us moved. The storm raged outside. The roof groaned above us. Blood pooled slowly beneath his shoulder, seeping into the old floorboards. Then he smiled. Not a happy smile. Not a threatening one either. It was something else entirely, a smile of weary, broken recognition. Like he'd been running toward this moment his whole life and had finally arrived. Alara, he breathed. My name in his mouth. After all these years. After everything. I stumbled backward, the poker raised, my back hitting the low slope of the roof. Don't, I heard myself say. Don't you dare say my name. He didn't move. Probably couldn't. His eyes never left mine, though. They followed me with that same intense focus they'd always had, the focus that had once made me feel like the only person in the world. You're bleeding, I said stupidly. State the obvious. Keep it together. I know. His voice was rough, scraped raw. I didn't have anywhere else to go. Those words hit me harder than any accusation could have. He didn't have anywhere else to go. So he came here. To me. The woman who put him away. The woman who destroyed his life. Or saved her own. You're a wanted man, I whispered. The whole state is looking for you. Every news channel. Every police scanner. They're all looking for you. I know. He shifted slightly, and a fresh wave of blood welled up between his fingers. I saw the helicopters. I should have run. I should have climbed back down that ladder, grabbed my phone, and called the police. It would have been so easy. One phone call, and my nightmare would be over. He'd go back to prison, and I'd go back to my quiet life, and none of this would have happened. But I didn't move. Because underneath the terror, underneath the shock, underneath every rational thought screaming at me to save myself, there was something else. Curiosity. How did he find me? How did he escape? How long had he been watching? And that cough, that horrible familiar cough, was he dying right here in my attic, bleeding out while I stood frozen with a fireplace poker in my hands? Alara. His voice was softer now, almost gentle. I'm not here to hurt you. I never wanted to hurt you. I laughed. It came out broken, hysterical. You nearly destroyed me. Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe. Or memory. I know. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating his face for a split second. In that moment, I saw him clearly. Not the monster I'd made him into, not the man I'd loved, but something in between. Something human and broken and desperate. He was bleeding out on my attic floor. And I was the only one who could help him. Or turn him in. The choice hung between us, heavy as the storm outside. He watched me with those dark eyes, waiting. Not pleading. Not bargaining. Just waiting to see what I would do. I thought about the life I'd built. The careful, quiet existence. The way I checked my locks 3 times before bed. The way I still jumped at unexpected sounds. The way I'd never really felt safe. Not since the day I testified, not since the moment I looked into his eyes and chose myself over him. I thought about prison, about what they'd do to him if I sent him back, about what he'd done to deserve it. I thought about the sound of his voice saying my name after all these years. The poker trembled in my hands. You're losing too much blood, I said finally. The words came out flat, emotionless. If I don't stop it, you'll die up here. A long pause. Rain hammered the roof. Is that a question? He asked quietly. I shook my head. It's an observation. He closed his eyes for a moment, and I watched the tension leave his shoulders. Not relief, something deeper. Surrender. He was putting his life in my hands, the same way I'd once put mine in the hands of 12 strangers in a courtroom. What do you need? He asked. I almost laughed again. What did I need? I needed to go back in time. I needed to never meet him. I needed to be anyone other than the woman standing in a dusty attic with her worst nightmare bleeding on the floor. But I couldn't have any of those things. So instead, I lowered the poker. "Stay still," I said. "I'll get bandages. And if you move, if you try anything, I'll finish what the bullet started." He nodded once. Just once. And I believed him. I climbed back down the ladder, my legs shaking so badly I nearly fell. In the bathroom, I grabbed the first aid kit, towels, anything that might stop the bleeding. My hands moved automatically, but my mind was spinning. What was I doing? This man was a fugitive. This man was dangerous. This man was the reason I'd spent 3 years looking over my shoulder. But he was also the man who'd once held me all night because I couldn't sleep. The man who'd taught me to trust someone again after years of being alone. The man I'd loved with every piece of my broken heart before I learned what he really was. When I climbed back up, he hadn't moved. Blood had pooled wider beneath him, dark and thick. His eyes were closed, his face pale as death. I knelt beside him and pressed the towels against his shoulder. His eyes fluttered open, finding mine. "You came back," he whispered. "I never left," I said. And it was true. I'd never really left him, not in the ways that mattered. He'd been hiding in the corners of my mind for 3 years, a ghost I couldn't exorcise. Now he was hiding in my attic. And I had no idea what came next. The bleeding stopped eventually. Not because I was skilled at anything. I pressed towels against his shoulder until the pressure did its work, and he lay there silent through all of it, teeth clenched, eyes fixed on some distant point in the darkness. When the flow finally slowed to a seep, I sat back on my heels and looked at my hands. They were covered in his blood. I'd imagined seeing him again 1,000 times. In every version, I was strong. I was cold. I was untouchable. I told him exactly what he'd done to me and watched him crumble. I never imagined kneeling in my own attic with his blood under my fingernails, trying to keep him alive. "We need to get you off this floor," I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "Can you move?" He tested his arm, winced, nodded. I helped him sit up, then stand. He was heavier than I expected, his weight dragging against me as we stumbled toward the far corner of the attic where an old mattress lay against the wall, covered in a dusty sheet. I'd never noticed it before, probably left by the previous owners. He collapsed onto it with a groan that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his bones. I stood over him, breathing hard, still holding the bloody towels. The storm was beginning to ease outside, the thunder rolling further away, the rain softening to a steady whisper. In the quiet, I could hear everything. His breathing, mine, the old house settling around us. "Why here?" I asked. He looked up at me. Even in the dim light, I could see the exhaustion carved into his face. "You're the only person I know who lives in the middle of nowhere." That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to demand the real reason, the truth, the explanation I'd waited 3 years to hear. But standing there in the dark, with his blood drying on my skin, I couldn't find the words. So instead, I did the only thing I could think of. I went downstairs and made coffee. The kitchen felt foreign, like I was seeing it for the first time. The clean countertops. The plants on the windowsill. The photographs on the refrigerator of friends I'd made here. People who knew nothing about my past. This was the life I'd built. Safe. Simple. Empty. I poured 2 mugs, added sugar to one. He'd always taken sugar, and carried them back up the ladder. He was exactly where I'd left him, but his eyes were open now, watching the attic hatch like he'd been counting the seconds until I returned. When he saw the mug in my hand, something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or gratitude. It was hard to tell in the shadows. I sat on an old wooden crate a few feet away from the mattress, close enough to talk, far enough to run if I needed to. I handed him the mug. His fingers brushed mine as he took it. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The rain continued its steady rhythm on the roof. The attic smelled like dust and blood and the sharp bitterness of coffee. Outside, the world was waking up to the aftermath of the storm. Inside, we were suspended in something else entirely. "You look different," he said finally. "So do you." A ghost of a smile. Prison will do that. I didn't smile back. So will testifying against the man you loved. His eyes dropped to the mug in his hands. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. I never blamed you for that. The words hit me like a physical blow. You should have. I know what I was. He looked up, and in the dim light, I saw something I never expected to see in his eyes. Shame. I know what I did. The things I was involved in. The people I hurt. A pause. The way I hurt you. I felt my throat tighten. You lied to me for 2 years. I did. You told me you were someone else. You made me fall in love with a fiction. I did. You let me believe I knew you, and all along you were. I stopped, the words catching. You were a monster. He didn't flinch. Didn't defend himself. He just sat there, holding the coffee I'd given him, and took it. All of it. Yes, he said simply. I was. The admission hung between us, heavy and raw. I'd waited 3 years to hear him acknowledge what he'd done. In court, he'd pleaded not guilty. In the media, his lawyers had painted me as a scorned woman with an axe to grind. Every version of his story had been designed to make me the villain. But here, in the dark, he wasn't fighting anymore. Do you remember the first time we met? He asked. I did. Of course I did. A gallery opening in the city. He'd been standing alone in front of a painting I didn't understand, and when I'd ask him what he saw in it, he'd talk for 20 minutes about light and shadow and the spaces between what we show the world and what we hide. I'd been captivated. You told me I had kind eyes, I said. You did. You do. They were blind eyes. I didn't see anything. You saw what I wanted you to see. He set the mug down, wincing as the movement pulled at his shoulder. I was good at that, showing people exactly what they needed to believe. Why? The question came out before I could stop it. Why me? Why go to all that trouble for someone like me? He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different. Softer. Because you were real. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Real? I was a waitress who painted on weekends. I had nothing. You had everything. He leaned forward slightly, and even in the darkness, the intensity of his gaze was unmistakable. You laughed at stupid jokes. You cried at commercials. You talked to stray cats like they could understand you. You were the most honest person I had ever met, and he stopped. Swallowed. I wanted to be near that. I wanted to feel what it was like to be someone who didn't have to hide. But you were hiding. Every second. I know. His voice cracked. I know. I looked away, unable to bear the weight of his honesty. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was supposed to be cold, manipulative, the same man who destroyed everything he touched. Instead, he was sitting on a dirty mattress in my attic, bleeding and broken, telling me I'd been the best thing in his life. It would have been easier if he'd been cruel. The night I testified, I said slowly, I was so scared I couldn't breathe. I sat in that courthouse bathroom for an hour before they called me, telling myself I could still leave. I could still run. I could still disappear the way you taught me to disappear. But you didn't. No. I turned back to him. Because I realized that if I ran, you'd win. Not in the way the court would measure it. But you'd win because I'd become like you. I'd spend my life looking over my shoulder, lying about who I was, running from the truth. And I refused to let you do that to me. He was very still. So I testified. I told them everything. And when I looked at you sitting there in your suit with your perfect lawyer, I saw something in your eyes that I didn't expect. What? Pride. The word hung in the air between us. He didn't deny it. Didn't look away. You were proud of me, I continued. For being brave enough to do it. For choosing myself over you. And I've never understood that. Not for 1 second. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I loved you, Alara. Not the way I'd loved before, possessive, controlling, like property. I loved you like something precious I didn't deserve to hold. And I knew, I always knew that one day you'd find out what I was. One day you'd have to choose. So you let me testify. No. He shook his head slowly. I let myself get caught. The words didn't make sense at first. I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. What? The night before the FBI raided my operation, I had a chance to run. A dozen chances. My men were telling me to disappear, to burn everything and start over somewhere else. That's what I'd always done. That's who I was. But you didn't. No. His eyes met mine, and in them I saw something I'd never seen before. Vulnerability. Because if I ran, you'd spend the rest of your life waiting for the other shoe to drop. You'd never know if I was coming back, if I'd drag you into my world, if you'd ever be safe. I couldn't do that to you. You went to prison for me. I went to prison because I deserved it. But I stayed because of you. He leaned back against the wall, exhaustion pulling at his features. When you testified, when I saw you stand there and tell the truth even though it terrified you, I knew I'd made the right choice. You were free. Really free. Not because I'd let you go, but because you'd let yourself go. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Everything I'd believed for 3 years was shifting, cracking, reforming into something I didn't recognize. You let me believe you were a monster. I was a monster. You let me hate you. You needed to. I stood up, pacing the small space, my arms wrapped around myself. 3 years. 3 years I've carried this weight. This guilt. This fear. And you're telling me it was all, what? A gift. I'm telling you I loved you enough to let you go. I stopped pacing. Stared at him. This man who destroyed so much, who'd built an empire on other people's suffering, who'd lied to me every day we were together, and yet he'd given me the only honest thing he had. The rain had stopped. Outside, the first pale light of dawn was beginning to creep across the sky, visible through the small attic window. Morning was coming. And with it, the world. They're going to find you, I said quietly. The police. The FBI. Someone will see something, say something. It's only a matter of time. He nodded, like he'd already accepted this. I know. Then why are you here? Really? He looked at me, and in the growing light, I saw him clearly for the first time. Not the man I'd loved. Not the monster I'd feared. Just a man. Broken. Tired. Human. Because I wanted to see you one more time, he said. Before it all ended. I stood there in the silence, the weight of his words pressing down on me. Outside, the world was waking up. Inside, everything I thought I knew was falling apart. And somewhere in the distance, I heard the first sound of helicopters. The helicopters changed everything. They came low over the valley, their blades chopping the morning air into pieces. I heard them before I saw them, that distinctive thumping that vibrates through windows and walls and settles deep in your chest. By the time I reached the attic window, they were already close enough to see the markings on their sides. Police. Multiple units. Caleb hadn't moved from the mattress, but his eyes were fixed on the ceiling, tracking the sound like a hunted animal. I watched his face in the pale dawn light and saw something I'd never seen on him before. Fear. Not for himself. Something else. Fear of what would happen to me if they found him here. They're searching the whole county, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. They'll be door to door by noon. He nodded slowly. You need to tell them I broke in. Held you hostage. Anything. They'll believe you. I stared at him. You want me to lie. I want you to survive. He tried to sit up straighter, winced, kept going. If they find me here, if they think you helped me, Alara, they'll charge you. Harboring a fugitive. Obstruction. You could go to prison. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. I'm not going to prison because of you, I said. I already did that once. He didn't argue. Just watched me with those dark eyes, waiting for my next move. The helicopters passed, their sound fading toward the next valley. But we both knew they'd be back. This was a manhunt, not a search. They wouldn't stop until they found him. I made a decision. Stay here. Don't move. Don't make a sound. I climbed down the ladder and closed the attic hatch behind me. In the bathroom, I scrubbed his blood off my hands until the water ran clear. I changed my clothes. I combed my hair. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a woman I barely recognized. Then I went outside and waited. The first car arrived an hour later. A county sheriff's vehicle, white with green stripes, crawling up my gravel drive like it had all the time in the world. 2 officers got out. One young, one older, both with their hands resting casually on the belts, close to their weapons. Morning, the older one said, tipping his hat. Sorry to bother you. We are doing door-to-door in the area. You probably heard the helicopters. I did. I kept my voice calm, curious. What's going on? You haven't heard. It's all over the news. He studied my face as he spoke. Prison break 3 days ago. Federal inmate escaped during transport. We've got reason to believe he might be heading this way. Here. I let confusion show on my face. Why would anyone come here? The younger officer spoke up. He's from the city originally. We are checking all rural properties within a 50-mile radius. Just in case. I nodded like this made perfect sense. Like my heart wasn't pounding hard enough to break ribs. Well, I haven't seen anyone, I said. It's just me out here. And the cats. The older officer smiled slightly. Mind if we take a quick look around? Standard procedure. This was the moment. The test. If I hesitated, if I showed even a flicker of fear, they'd know something was wrong. 3 years of rebuilding my life, 3 years of learning to be someone else. It all came down to this. Of course, I said, stepping aside. I'll make some coffee. It's cold out here. They searched the barn first. I watched from the kitchen window as they kicked through old hay bales and shone flashlights into corners where nothing had lived for years. Then they moved to the house. I met them at the door with 2 steaming mugs. The older officer took his with a grateful nod. The younger one declined, his eyes moving constantly, cataloguing everything. The photographs on my refrigerator. The books on my shelves. The single coffee cup in the drying rack. Nice place, the younger one said. Live alone. Divorced, I lied smoothly. Best decision I ever made. He almost smiled. Mind if I check the upstairs? Go ahead. Bathroom's at the end of the hall. I watched him climb the stairs, my pulse roaring in my ears. The attic hatch was in the ceiling of the hallway. Closed. Unremarkable. But if he looked up, if he noticed the pull cord, if he wondered why someone would have an attic in a house this old. The older officer was saying something about the weather, about the storm last night, about how they'd had reports of a man matching the description near the river. I nodded in all the right places, made sounds of agreement, while upstairs I heard footsteps moving slowly across the floor, directly beneath the attic. 1 floor below where Caleb was hiding, bleeding, holding his breath. The footsteps stopped. I waited. Upstairs, a door opened. Closed. More footsteps. Then the younger officer's voice, muffled by walls. All clear up here. He came back down and shook his head at his partner. Nothing. Just an old house and a divorced woman who made good coffee. The older officer finished his mug and set it on the counter. Thank you for your time. If you see anything unusual, anyone who doesn't belong, you call us immediately. Don't approach. Just call. I will, I said. Be safe out there. They left. I watched their taillights disappear down the drive, and when the dust settled, I leaned against the closed door and let myself shake. 20 minutes passed before I could climb back up to the attic. He was exactly where I'd left him, but something was different. His eyes were brighter, more focused, watching me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. You lied to them, he said. I know. For me. I know. He was quiet for a moment. Why? I sat down on the crate, suddenly exhausted beyond words. I don't know. I was going to. When they first arrived, I was going to tell them everything. Turn you in. End this. But you didn't. No. I looked at him, really looked at him. When that officer was upstairs, standing right below you, I realized something. I've spent 3 years being afraid. Afraid of you. Afraid of your world. Afraid of what might happen if anyone found out who I used to be. And in that moment, with him standing there, I wasn't afraid anymore. What were you? Angry. The word surprised me even as I said it. Angry that I've been hiding just as much as you have. Angry that I let what you did define my whole life. Angry that I've been living in a cage of my own making while you were in a real one. He said nothing. Just watched me with those dark, unreadable eyes. Tell me the truth, I said. All of it. Not the court version. Not the version you told yourself to sleep at night. The real truth. Why did you come here? He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw. I came here because you're the only person who ever saw me. Not the criminal. Not the monster. Me. And I needed to know, before I died, if that person was real. If I was real. And are you? I don't know. He looked away. I thought prison would change me. Give me time to think, to become something different. But it just made me more of what I already was. Alone. Empty. Waiting for something I couldn't name. The helicopters are going to come back, I said. They're going to search harder. Bring dogs, probably. If they do, they'll find you. I know. You could die here. In my attic. Bleeding out on a stranger's mattress. I know. I stood up. Walked to the window. Looked out at the valley spread below, the farms and fields and distant roads where men with guns were searching for the man hiding in my house. What if I could get you out? I asked. Behind me, I heard him shift. What? There's an old logging road behind the property. Leads to the next county. My father used to take it hunting when I was a kid. It's overgrown now, but it's still there. I turned to face him. If I could get you to my truck, if I could drive you part way. No. The word was sharp. Final. Why not? Because if they catch us, you go to prison. Not for months. 4 years. And I won't be the reason you lose everything again. You already are. I crossed back to him, standing over him where he lay. You've been the reason for everything since the day I met you. The good and the bad. The love and the fear. You're woven into every part of me, Caleb, and I hate it. I hate that you still matter. I hate that I lied to those officers. I hate that I'm standing here right now. Tears were streaming down my face. I hadn't even noticed them starting. But I can't let you die, I whispered. I can't. So you're going to take the help I'm offering, and then you're going to disappear, and I'm never going to see you again. Do you understand? He reached up slowly, carefully, and took my hand. His fingers were cold, but his grip was steady. I understand. From somewhere in the distance, the helicopters were coming back. We sat in the attic and listened to them hunt. They swept back and forth across the valley like birds of prey, patient and methodical. Every time the sound grew close, we stopped breathing. Every time it faded, we started again. Caleb's shoulder had stopped bleeding, but he was pale beneath the dirt and beard. Fever, probably. Infection setting in. He needed a hospital, medicine, things I couldn't give him. But I could give him water. Food. Clean bandages from a first aid kit I'd bought years ago and never used. I climbed up and down that ladder a dozen times, each trip feeling more surreal than the last, bringing supplies to a wanted man in my attic. The same man I'd testified against. The same man I'd loved. By late afternoon, the helicopters moved further east. A brief reprieve. We both knew they'd be back. I was sitting on the crate again, watching him through the dim light, when he spoke. Tell me about your life. The question caught me off guard. What? Here. This place. Tell me about it. I looked around the attic as if it could provide answers. It's quiet. That's why I chose it. No neighbors close enough to see. No past close enough to find me. Do you like it? Sometimes. I paused. Sometimes it feels like hiding. He nodded slowly, like he understood exactly what I meant. Because of course he did. Hiding was what he did best. I paint again, I heard myself say. There's a studio downstairs. The light is good in the mornings. His eyes softened. You always said you would. I stopped for a while. After everything. Couldn't hold a brush without my hand shaking. I looked down at my fingers, remembering. But eventually, the shaking stopped. The paintings got better. I started showing in a gallery in town. Nothing major. Just something. I'm glad. The simplicity of it undid me. Not a grand statement. Not an apology. Just genuine happiness that I'd found my way back to something I loved. Why did you let me believe you were dead to me? The question came out before I could stop it. All those years, I thought you were just gone. A monster I'd escaped. But you were in prison, thinking about me, and I never knew. What would you have done if you knew? The question hung in the air between us. I don't know, I admitted. Visited you? Hated you? Forgotten you? I honestly don't know. That's why. He shifted, wincing. You needed to move on. To build something without me in it. If you'd known I was thinking about you, if you'd felt any connection at all, you would have been trapped. Just like I was. Trapped. Prison is easy compared to loving someone you can't have. His voice was quiet, almost inaudible. Every night, I'd close my eyes and see your face. Every morning, I'd wake up and remember you were gone. That was the real sentence. Not the walls. Not the guards. You. I couldn't breathe. Don't, I whispered. It's the truth. I don't want your truth. I don't want any of this. I stood up, pacing the small space. I spent 3 years building walls to keep you out, and you just walk through them like they were nothing. I'm not walking through anything. I'm lying on a mattress in your attic, bleeding, waiting to die or get caught. That's not walking anywhere. I stopped pacing and looked at him. Really looked. Beneath the bravado, beneath the honesty, there was something I hadn't seen before. Resignation. He'd come here to say goodbye. Is that what this is? I asked. A final visit? Some kind of closure tour before you disappear for good? Something like that. Then why now? Why not write me a letter from prison? Why risk everything to show up on my doorstep like a ghost? He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. Heavier. Because I found something. In prison. Something that changes everything. I waited. There was a man. In my unit. We got to talking over the years, the way prisoners do. He was old, serving life for something he'd done decades ago. And one day, he told me about his wife. I sat back down on the crate, watching him. He said she visited him every month for 30 years. Every month, without fail. And when she got sick, when she couldn't travel anymore, she wrote him letters. Every week. Until she couldn't hold a pen. Caleb's eyes were distant, lost in the memory. I asked him once why she did it. Why she stayed loyal to a man she'd never live with again. You know what he said. What? He said, because I gave her the truth. Not pretty versions. Not lies to protect her. Just the truth. And that was enough. The words settled between us like stones. I never gave you the truth, he continued. I gave you a story. A character. Someone I thought you'd love. And when you found out who I really was, it destroyed you. Not because of what I'd done, but because I'd made you love a lie. I wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him he was wrong. But he wasn't. The old man died 6 months ago, Caleb said. At his funeral, his wife spoke. She was in a wheelchair, barely able to talk, but she spoke. And she said the same thing. He gave me the truth. It was ugly and hard and sometimes unbearable. But it was real. And real was enough. His eyes met mine. I don't want to die with you believing the lie. The attic felt smaller suddenly. Closer. The air thicker. Then tell me, I said. Tell me everything. He did. He told me about his childhood, the real one, not the sanitized version he'd given me years ago. A father who was cruel. A mother who disappeared. A world that taught him strength meant taking, never giving. He told me how he'd fallen into the life, how one small crime led to another until he was in too deep to climb out. He told me about the things he'd done, the people he'd hurt, the lines he'd crossed that could never be uncrossed. And he told me about the night before the FBI raid. I had a bag packed, he said. Money, passports, a plan to disappear so completely no one would ever find me. My men were waiting. The car was running. All I had to do was walk out the door. But you didn't. No. He looked at me. I went to your apartment instead. Stood outside your window for an hour, watching you sleep. And I realized that if I ran, you'd spend the rest of your life wondering. Waking up at night, checking locks, jumping at shadows. You'd never be free. So you stayed. I stayed. I let them arrest me. I let you testify. A long pause. I let you save yourself. The tears came before I could stop them. Not loud sobs, silent streams running down my face, dripping onto my hands. You should have told me, I whispered. And then what? You'd wait for me? Visit me in prison? Waste your life on someone who didn't deserve it? That wasn't your choice to make. It was the only choice that mattered. I stood up again, but this time I didn't pace. I walked to the mattress and sat down beside him, close enough to feel the heat coming off his skin, the fever burning beneath. You're still making choices for me, I said. Showing up here. Telling me this now. You're still deciding what I can handle. I'm trying to give you the truth. Then give it all. I turned to face him. No more protecting me. No more deciding what I need. Just the truth. Every piece of it. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out something I hadn't noticed before. A photograph. Worn at the edges, creased from folding and unfolding. He handed it to me, and I looked down at it in the dim light. It was me. Years younger, laughing at something off camera, sitting in the apartment we'd shared. I didn't remember anyone taking this picture. Didn't remember it existing at all. I kept this with me every day, he said quietly. In prison, they check everything. Search every cell. But I found ways to hide it. Behind loose bricks. In books I'd hollowed out. Places no one would think to look. I stared at the photograph, my hands trembling. You were my truth, he continued. The only real thing I ever had. And I know that's not enough. I know it doesn't fix anything. But I needed you to know. Before the end. Outside, the helicopters were coming back. Closer this time. Searchlights probably. Dogs maybe. But I couldn't hear them anymore. All I could hear was the sound of my own heart breaking open. The helicopters were close enough to shake the roof. I sat beside him on that dirty mattress, holding a photograph of myself I'd never known existed, and listened to the end approach. They'd be here soon. Minutes, maybe. The dogs would smell the blood. The lights would find the house. And everything would be over. But I wasn't the same woman who'd climbed into this attic 12 hours ago. That woman was afraid. That woman was hiding. That woman had spent 3 years building walls to keep the world out. This woman was done hiding. There's another way, I said. Caleb looked at me, fever bright in his eyes. What are you talking about? The logging road. Behind the property. If we go now, before they get close enough to see. We. He shook his head weakly. No. Alara, no. You're not coming with me. I'm not asking permission. I stood up and crossed to the stack of boxes in the corner. My father's things. I'd never been able to throw them away. Now I was grateful for my sentimentality. I pulled out an old duffel bag, canvas, worn from years of hunting trips. Inside, I found what I was looking for. My father's truck keys. He'd kept a spare set in here for emergencies. I'd forgotten until this moment. "I'm going to get you out," I said, turning back to Caleb. "Not because I love you. Not because I forgive you. Because for 3 years, I've been a prisoner too. And I'm done." He tried to sit up, failed, tried again. "If they catch us." "Then they catch us." I knelt beside him, meeting his eyes. "But I'm not letting you die in my attic while I hide downstairs. I'm not that woman anymore." Something shifted in his expression. Not hope exactly. Something deeper. Recognition. "You always were the bravest person I knew," he said quietly. "I'm not brave. I'm just tired of being afraid." I helped him stand. He was weaker than before, the fever stealing his strength. But he could walk. Barely. We made it to the attic hatch, and I went down first, guiding his feet to the ladder rungs, catching him when he stumbled. The house was dark. I'd turned off all the lights hours ago. Through the windows, I could see the sweep of searchlights in the distance, moving closer. We made it to the back door. The night air hit us like a wall, cold, sharp, smelling of rain and wet earth. The truck was in the barn, a quarter-mile across the field. Open ground. No cover. "We'll never make it," Caleb breathed. "Yes, we will." I took his arm, wrapped it around my shoulder, and we walked. The field was mud from the storm. Every step sucked at our feet, pulled at our strength. Caleb's weight dragged against me, but I kept moving. One step. Another. The barn getting closer with every painful inch. Behind us, lights crested the hill. They were here. "Leave me," Caleb said. "Alara, leave me and run. You can still." "Shut up." I'd never said those words to him before. Never had the courage. But I said them now, and something in his eyes sparked. Recognition again. Respect. We kept moving. The barn doors were old wood, held shut by a rusted chain. I fumbled with it, my fingers numb from cold and fear, and finally it gave way. The doors swung open, revealing darkness inside and the familiar shape of my father's truck. A truck that hadn't moved in 2 years. "Please start," I prayed. "Please, please start." I got Caleb into the passenger seat, then ran around to the driver's side. The key turned. The engine coughed, sputtered, coughed again. Behind us, lights were sweeping the field. The engine caught. I didn't wait. I threw it in gear and drove straight out the back of the barn, through the old fence that had been broken for years, onto the overgrown track that led into the woods. The truck bounced and lurched over roots and rocks. Branches scraped the sides, clawed at the windows. I didn't slow down. Couldn't slow down. Behind us, I saw lights swinging toward the barn, heard the faint sound of shouted orders. Then the trees closed in, and we were alone. The logging road hadn't been used in decades. It was barely a path, more suggestion than reality. But my father had driven it 100 times, and I'd ridden beside him, learning every turn, every washout, every place where the mountain dropped away on one side. I drove from memory. Caleb was slumped against the passenger door, his eyes closed, his breathing shallow. I didn't know if he was conscious. Didn't know if he'd make it. All I knew was the road ahead and the darkness behind. 20 minutes later, we emerged onto a paved county road. No lights. No helicopters. Just empty blacktop winding through empty hills. I pulled over and killed the engine. The silence was deafening. I looked at Caleb. His eyes were open, watching me. In the dim light from the dashboard, I could see the fever flush on his cheeks, the exhaustion carved into every line of his face. "You did it," he whispered. "We did it." I looked away, out the windshield at the dark road ahead. "This is as far as I go." He didn't argue, didn't plead, just nodded slowly, like he'd always known this moment would come. "There's a town about 20 miles east," I said. "Small. No police station. You can find help there. After that." I trailed off. After that, I didn't know. Didn't want to know. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the photograph. The one of me, laughing, years ago. He held it out. You should keep this. I looked at it, then at him. Why? Because it's yours. It was always yours. A pause. I just borrowed it for a while. I took the photograph. My fingers brushed his. Neither of us pulled away. Caleb. His name in my mouth, after all these years. What happened to us? I don't know what to call it. Love. Destruction. Both. But I know I wouldn't be who I am without it. Without you. You'd be stronger. No. I shook my head. I'd be different. And I don't want to be different. I want to be this. The woman who survived you. The woman who chose herself. The woman who just drove through a forest in the dark to save a man everyone else wants to see dead. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. Not the charming smile I'd fallen for years ago. Something smaller. Truer. That woman, he said, is remarkable. She is. I smiled too, just a little. And she's letting you go. I reached across him and opened the passenger door. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of pine and distant rain. He looked at the open door, then back at me. Will you be okay? He asked. I will be now. He nodded, believed me, and slowly, painfully, he climbed out of the truck. I watched him stand in the darkness, swaying slightly, his hand pressed to his wounded shoulder. He looked back at me through the open door, and for a moment, we were just two people on a dark road, holding everything that couldn't be said. Goodbye, Alara. Goodbye, Caleb. He closed the door. I watched him walk into the darkness until I couldn't see him anymore. Then I sat there for a long time, alone in my father's truck, holding a photograph of a woman I used to be. When I finally drove away, I didn't look back. Dawn was breaking when I pulled into my driveway. The police were everywhere. Lights flashing. Officers moving. The barn doors hung open where I'd left them, and the field was churned to mud from their vehicles. I got out of the truck and walked toward them. The older officer from yesterday saw me and hurried over, his face tight with concern. Are you all right? We saw signs of a vehicle leaving the property. We thought maybe you'd been. I'm fine. I cut him off gently. I heard the helicopters and got scared. Drove into town to stay with a friend. I just got back. He studied my face. Looking for lies. Looking for truth. You should have told someone you were leaving. We were worried. I'm sorry. I panicked. I met his eyes and held them. Did you find him? The fugitive. He shook his head slowly. No. We lost the trail near the river. He could be anywhere by now. I nodded. Looked appropriately relieved. Well, I'm glad he's gone, I said. I'd like to get some sleep now, if that's all right. The officer hesitated, then nodded. We'll be in the area for a few more days. If you need anything. I know who to call. He tipped his hat and walked away. I went inside. Locked the door behind me. Leaned against it and listened to my heartbeat slowly return to normal. In the kitchen, I made coffee. Sat at the table. Watched the sun rise over the valley. And for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't afraid. The attic would need to be cleaned. The blood would have to be scrubbed from the floorboards. But not today. Today, I sat in my kitchen and watched the light change and let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. Grief. Relief. Loss. Freedom. He was gone. Really gone this time. Not just to prison, but to wherever broken people go when they're finally allowed to disappear. And I was here. In my house. In my life. Finally my own. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the photograph. Studied the woman in it. Younger, yes, but not so different. Same eyes. Same smile. Same capacity to love someone she shouldn't. I set it on the windowsill, facing out toward the morning sun. Then I went to my studio, picked up a brush, and started to paint. 6 months later. I don't watch the news anymore. Don't check the fugitive websites. Don't wonder where he is or if he's alive. Some questions don't have answers. Some doors close and stay closed. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind blows through the valley and the house settles around me, I think about a man on a dark road, walking away into nothing. I think about the choice I made. Not to save him. Not to love him. But to finally, truly, let him go. And in letting him go, to free myself. The painting on my easel is almost finished. It's a landscape, the field behind my house, the barn, the mountains beyond. But if you look closely, in the shadows at the edge of the trees, there's a figure. Small, almost invisible. A man, walking away. No one who sees it will understand. They'll think it's just a shadow, just a trick of the light. But I'll know. I'll always know. And maybe that's enough.